Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 14th Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting. Let's see. Oh, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Copeland.
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. At the last curriculum committee of the board, we had a number of presentations. We'd like to highlight two of them this evening. The first is an integrated math program. This is something that we feel is right in line with our strategic plan, and we're looking forward to having another version of that report by Mr. Jason Lilly, who's our supervisor for math and science, and Georgine Heibeck. Heibeck. It looked like an L, I'm sorry. Jason?
While Jason's loading that presentation, we are having technical difficulties with board docs this evening. So if you're trying to log in, you're probably not going to get in, and it may boot me out of here, but we should be able to see the presentations just fine.
All right, thank you. We're really excited tonight to share our findings around integrated math, so thank you. Just to highlight some of the team members, Georgine Heibeck is sitting to my right, has been a really helpful in developing this and investigating this with me. Additional team members include Brian Cody, Nancy Aconsa-Mesa, Amy Murphy, who's from Welsh Valley, John Vaccaro, who's at LM High School, and Catherine Demaray, who is over at Harriton. This idea of integrated math came from essentially what this quote says. What students learn is fundamentally connected with how they learn it. If students learn math in a sequential and rigid way, that's how they'll view math. If students are exposed to mathematics in a way that talks about the why before the what, and they learn how to use math rather than do math, that will be their experience, and that will be how they view math as they head into the future. If you think back to how you, and I'll speak to myself, how we experienced mathematics. Everyone may have experienced it a little bit different, but if you think about your experience in high school and middle school, what math was like. For me, math looked like this. We would go through a unit, and that unit would start with an introductory lesson that maybe talked about the different things you would do throughout that unit. But then day in and day out, you'd come in, you'd go over the homework, the teacher would introduce something new. You then as a class with the teacher would practice that together. And then at some point after that, the teacher would say, all right, I'll let you try it now as students and show me that you can do what we just talked about. That would go on day in and day out for, say, 6 or 7 days. And then as you got to the end of the unit, you would take all those different skills one day at a time, and finally at the very end, the last section of almost every unit you've ever experienced was word problems. So that's when you finally at the very end would see, here's why we did all of the things we did in this unit, and we're going to get a chance now today to show you why we did what we did. So the why came at the very end. That was my experience, and I think that's the experience that many people have had with mathematics in the middle school and high school in your own experience. Integrated math is different. There are two things that we're going to try to look at as through this integrated math program. One is shifting content, and the other is shifting practice, which is kind of what we're talking about here, the way students experience math. Picture a class that does the why before the what, and that may be hard to visualize. So to do that, I want to share a little bit of an example. So think about that traditional approach where at the very end you finally get to see why you learned what you learned. Integrated math looks like this. This is a day one, problem one introductory question. So I'll highlight some of the key things. First of all, this was a unit on systems of equations. So some of you can probably picture what that unit typically looks like. But in this situation, you have the Martinez twins, Carlos and Clarita. And for their summer job, what they decide to do is start a pet sitting business. They have a spare shed in the backyard, and they have a fenced-in backyard. So they decide this is going to be a good venture. And they decided that based on some things they overheard when they were out and about, with some of the people saying it was difficult to find a place to board their animals. So they felt like this is a good idea, let's do this, this will be our summer job. So Carlos and Clarita dig into this a little bit, and they realize there are some constraints, one of which is the space available. So they're going to board cats and dogs. Cats take up 6 square feet of space. Dogs require 24 square feet of space, which allows them room to run. Their available space is 360 square feet. And they can build this any way they want. They can put as many pens in there as fit and dog runs as fit. But there's obviously costs associated with this. You have to buy the crates and the pens. So they look at this, they dig into this, and from past ventures and available money, they have $1,280 available to start this whole venture. Cost associated, it's $32 for each cat pen, $80 for each dog run. So we have two things going on here. We have a situation where there's a limited amount of space, and then there's available monies. So there's two different constraints going on. That's what a system of equations is. Two different variables going on at the same time. So right now, what's happened is to set the stage. It's something that kids can visualize and make sense of. That's one of the challenges with mathematics. So a student can picture this situation. So this is a business like any other business. They want to make as much money as they can. So they start thinking about that. They're going to charge $8 a day to board a cat and $20 a day to board dogs. So that's how they start recouping the money. Typical business venture. So here are the questions. They need to figure out how many of each type of pet should they prepare for. So how many cat pens, how many dog runs should they get? Their dad then makes a suggestion. He just says, how about you just start with 12 and 12? I think that's a good place to start. So then Carlos chimes in and says, well, I think we should do more dogs because we charge more. While his sister says, I think we should have more cats because they take up less space, so we're going to be able to make more money that way. So that's the scenario. And then this would be posed to the class and says, what do you think? What should they do? If this was you starting this venture, how would you organize your cats and dogs? And how much money would you make? And find the best way that you can do that. So the students don't know this is a systems of equations unit. But there are two unknowns, there are multiple constraints, and ultimately this is an optimization problem because you're supposed to find how you can make the most money in this venture. So there are a couple things that are really unique about this. One is this particular program, and I'll talk more about it, is really thoughtful in how it was developed. When you see this, you might think a student wouldn't know where to start. But the fact that the dad gave you information and said, why don't you start with 12 cats and 12 dogs? That gives you a launching point. So it's something everyone could start with, and you could move up or down from there. The other thing that is unique about this is that this particular program has a very low entry point and a very high ceiling. Your low entry point is starting with what the dad shared. How you approach this problem is where you can do this very differently. There were no directions or instructions with what to do. Students use any type of math they've ever experienced up to this point to try to solve this problem. And then they're going to share what they did and how they did it. So somebody might draw a graph. Somebody might make a table. You know, some of your stronger kids might jump into right away making equations that represent these two pieces of information. But in reality, a lot of kids are going to want to draw a picture. They're going to take a piece of graph paper and draw that shed and try to fit the different crates in there. And that, in turn, could lead to a table, which could lead to an equation. And that's one of the things that's really cool about integrated math. It ties lots of different types of math together. So how did we get to the point where we're talking about this? So in 2016, this was shortly after I came on board here at Lower Merion. It was the summer, and Mr. Copeland called me down to his office and said, I was looking at some of the data that came in over the summer, and I just have some questions for you. And so he brought up that he wanted me to take a hard look at our curricular alignment to the PA core standards at the middle school, specifically 8th grade, the depth and the amount of time we spent on different areas of mathematics in that year, and ultimately the effectiveness of our Algebra 1 Part 1 program. So with the help of the teachers and the content leads at the different buildings at the secondary level, we dug into this. And what we found, some of which was surprising, some of which wasn't, was that we did spend a significantly more amount of time on algebra than other areas of mathematics, more time than geometry and data analysis. We also found that we currently have no course that's specifically dedicated to 8th grade math standards. There are 8th grade math standards, but we don't have a course specifically dedicated to that. Right now what happens is we expose all 8th grade students to double content. So essentially all 8th grade students, regardless of whether they're in Algebra 1 Part 1, Algebra 1, or Geometry, at the same time they are held accountable to 8th grade standards. And we try to infuse that into that course, all those different courses at the same time. So kids are being exposed to double content. The original rationale behind the Algebra 1 Part 1 class was to try to create double the amount of time for a student to master the concepts of Algebra 1. But what happened is that extra time that's created typically in an Algebra 1 Part 1 is being taken up by 8th grade math standards. So the rationale of trying to give them that double time isn't a reality right now the way our curriculum currently exists and the way our course sequence currently exists. They're still being asked to do double duty. One of the other things that I want to highlight here is, when Mr. Copeland asked me to dig into this a little bit, at that time, about 90% of our students were being unsuccessful on the 8th grade PSSA in this course. So again, this course is not aligned to the 8th grade standards that students were being assessed on. That's a challenge. Sorry, my button's not working. No, I'll just click on it. The arrow buttons weren't working. All right, I'll just click it with the clicker. Yeah, make it work. So after we dug into that and we found what we found, I came back to Mr. Copeland and shared those results and said, hey, how about this integrated math? I think that's something that we could maybe explore. And after talking to Mr. Copeland about that, he does something that I think is just really, really trying to find the right word. Savvy.
Time's ticking.
Yeah. So when we present a really new or what we feel is a great idea, one of the things he does that hits home for me is he asks a question. He says, I really like that. That's a great idea, but what problem does that solve? So it's, this is a solution to what? In this case, the findings that we had really fell into three different categories for me. And they're the three things that we have the most control over: curriculum, assessment, and instruction. So curricularly, we see that we have a sequence in math that's not necessarily aligned to the grade level standards. We definitely have a situation in 8th grade where we're teaching double content to all of our 8th grade students. We have an access and equity gap that we've created through our curriculum and our math sequence, which shows up even more profoundly as we enter the high school years. We have a situation at the middle level where kids are being double tested. What I mean by that is we have students who are taking the PSSA and the Keystone Algebra 1 exam in the same year at the middle school. That happens for some of our 7th graders and some of our 8th graders. And somewhere that we could do a better job is in student engagement. If you think about how we experienced math and the example that I started with of what an integrated math lesson looks like, it's very different. So we know we can work towards creating a more student-centered and inquiry-based classroom. So what exactly is integrated math? There were two things that I talked about. We're talking about shifting content and shifting practices. Integrated math shifts content. Integrated math takes your traditional Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, and instead of teaching those mathematical concepts in 3 separate courses, it blends them together. So each year for 3 years, students experience algebra skills, geometry skills, and data analysis. Right now, the geometry and data analysis kind of all get crammed into that second year in our current sequence in geometry. So for 3 years, each of those 3 years, students experience all 3 of those items: algebra, geometry, and data analysis. Typically, those courses are called Integrated 1, Integrated 2, and Integrated 3. This is how most of the rest of the world teaches mathematics and has forever. The United States is sort of the exception to the rule in that we break the math out into individual silos like that. Something else that's interesting is right now, if you look at our program K through 7, we teach integrated math, which means in each of those years, we do algebra skills and number sense. We do geometry, and we also include data analysis. But for some reason, the 3 years in between, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, we teach separately. We break those content apart. When a student gets to pre-calculus, they realize very quickly that in pre-calculus, you now need to use all of those different skills again together to be successful in that course. So pre-calculus and beyond is also an integrated math. It's those 3 years in between that are different. Because integrated math courses are used all over the world, they are absolutely recognized by colleges and universities. There are also states in the United States that exclusively teach integrated math, and the majority of states give local districts the option to choose which pathway they want to explore. The idea of integrated math, again, because of the rest of the world internationally using an integrated approach, is more closely aligned to IB than our current sequence. When the Common Core was shared to the United States as a way to think about how we teach kids math, there were 2 pathways that were shared. One is the traditional pathway, which is traditional to the United States, and the other is an integrated pathway, which is the way the rest of the world teaches math. Both are viewed as an acceptable way to get kids to be successful in higher level math. They're both shared. This picture right here is taken from the Common Core Standards Appendix A. This is what was shared for districts to look at as they tried to find ways to realize what the Common Core was getting at. One thing that I want to highlight to try to make sense of integrated math a little bit, right now this is our current sequence: Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. 2 of those 3 years are dedicated to algebra skills. Integrated math is a shift in content. So really what happens is, where you see 2 of the 3 years being algebra-based, what happens over here is 2/3 of this course is algebra, and then the rest of it is data analysis and geometry. And then in the second year, it's 2/3 algebra, and then you still have another third of the course that's geometry and data analysis, and that gets realized a third time. What that does is it prevents the gaps that we currently see in our algebra skills. When a student is Algebra 1, then they go to geometry for a year, and in Algebra 2, there's a lot of, remember back in Algebra 1 when you did this. Now we're going to use those skills. So that's the difference in the 2. 2/3, 1/3 approach, but instead of doing 2 of the 3 years like we currently do, it's 2/3 every year, and they get that other 1/3 every year in between. One other thing I want to highlight here before I get off this slide is that regardless of which pathway you take, they both lead to higher level math. However, both pathways assume that students have already experienced Math 8. They both assume students have mastered 8th grade math, which we currently don't offer. So why would we change this integrated approach? We talked about it a little bit already, but one of the things I want to highlight is this is the way that kids see math as connected rather than disjointed. Right now, it is disjointed. If students are doing algebra, geometry, and data analysis every year for 3 years, they understand how they connect, they understand how they interrelate. Even in the problem that I shared to start with, a student could make a table, which leads to a graph, which leads to an equation, which leads to a table, which makes a graph, which leads to an equation. That's the spiral that's built into integrated math. All of those things are interconnected. When students understand how to use math rather than just do math, it also helps in science, because science is the application of math. So one of the things that integrated math can do is help students have greater access to the higher level science courses as well. In the two pathways I shared, even though the integrated pathway does that 2/3, 1/3 approach, what it also does is allow students to have 3 years of time to master what we currently teach in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. The other thing that it does is, since it's 2/3 each year, you don't actually complete all of the current Algebra 1 standards until some point during that second year of math. That has the impact of shifting the Keystone exam back to the end of Integrated 2, the second year of math. I'll talk more about that, but what that will do is that will help eliminate the double testing our students currently experience at the middle school, because the Keystone moves back a year for everybody. This integrated approach, talked a little bit about the science, but it increases access to honors level courses as well, even within the math. Our current curriculum is a content-based curriculum. If a student is in Honors Algebra 1 or Honors Geometry, to get to the next course in the honors level sequence, it is assumed that they have completed the previous honors level course. The content of that course, the curriculum of that course, is different than the college prep version of that course. And right now, that is a barrier for kids to be able to access our honors level math courses. There are ways to catch that up and do that, but it is very challenging. In integrated math, the differences between honors and college prep are extensions and enrichment activities. They are the optional standards within the Common Core. For example, in the Systems of Equations unit, a student at the honors level would explore matrices, whereas in the college prep level, they may not. However, being able to complete a matrix is not necessary in order to access the next honors level course. It was an extension of the previous course. So we have flexibility up and down within our sequence that we currently have real challenges with for the kids. This is just a visual to kind of show that. So once a student has completed Math 8, or an accelerated version of that with Math 7 and 8 together, once a student enters that integrated pathway, they have flexibility up and down within the sequence that we really currently struggle with. So from anywhere between Math 8 and getting to calculus, there's flexibility up and down within the integrated pathway. So a little more on the impacts to our PSSA and Keystone exams. Here's what we currently have. Anyone who's an accelerated 7th grader, which means they're currently taking Algebra 1 in 7th grade, they are one of those groups of students that are double tested. They would be responsible for the 7th grade PSSA and the Keystone Algebra 1 exam in that same year. The majority of our 8th grade students, since the majority of our 8th grade students are currently in Algebra 1, they also experience that double testing. The students who don't experience double testing currently at the middle school are students who are in Algebra 1 Part 1 and Geometry. The challenge those students face, however, is they're responsible for the 8th grade PSSA. And that 8th grade PSSA test is an integrated exam because it covers 8th grade math standards. And 8th grade math standards include algebra, geometry, and data analysis, all three of those components. So it looks like integrated math, but that's not what the courses look like that these students are experiencing right now. So there's a disconnect curricularly. So what does the integrated sequence do? 7th graders would no longer be double tested because the Keystone exam occurs after integrated 2. So no 7th graders at all, even those accelerated students, would be double tested in 7th grade. In 8th grade, the only students who would experience double testing are the students who would complete integrated 2. Those are our students that right now would currently complete geometry. They would be the only students who would be in a situation where they would have double testing at the middle school. The majority of our students would not, because the majority of our students would complete integrated 2 in 9th grade. So the other side of this, so that's all about the content, shifting the content, 2/3, 1/3. The other part of this is shifting practice. How do we deliver mathematics? How will we decide to have kids experience mathematics in our classrooms? This is the transformative piece. This is our strategic plan in action. MVP Math is a practices-focused approach. It's student-centered, it's inquiry-based, but the teacher is involved. That's what makes it a little different. When we started exploring integrated math, myself, Georgine Heibeck, and Amy Murphy went to a training for the Mathematics Vision Project. That's MVP. The Mathematics Vision Project started in Utah. Barbara Kuhl was one of the original authors of this program. What happened is when the Common Core was rolled out, Utah was one of the states that adopted integrated math as their sole approach. That's how the state decided they were going to teach math. At that time, there really were no resources available for an integrated approach in the United States. It wasn't used very much. So there was a group of teachers at this district near Salt Lake City who got together and said, all right, like any teachers would do, let's figure out how we're going to teach this and how we're going to do this. So they wrote their own notes and their own homework and their own assessments so that they could teach in an integrated way. What happened is other districts heard what they were doing. Other districts saw the results they were having. Other districts asked them to come teach them how to do what they do. And this thing just kind of took off. But when they built this, they looked at the work that was out there about how to achieve a practices approach. How do I have a student-centered math classroom? They looked at the work of Dr. Joe Bowler out of Stanford, who talks about math mindset, growth mindset in mathematics. Everyone can achieve at a certain level. Everyone can grow. Everyone can get better. So they thought about that when they developed this program. You saw an example, but the question that I led off with. It's the why before the what. It's making sense of the math. It's why we're doing the math first rather than having someone have to ask the question, when are we ever going to use this or why are we doing this? It answers that question first. This program is now used across the country and around the world. When we were at the training, they were talking about their next venture, which was flying over to Dubai to teach some of the people in Dubai how to deliver this program the way that they delivered it in Utah. The other thing that's different about this is this isn't from a publishing company. This was developed by teachers for teachers. They figured out how they were going to teach kids. They figured out how they were going to include math mindset, growth mindset, and they built that and they delivered that. And now they're sharing that with other people. Because of that, there are no costs associated with these resources. The student handouts, the teacher notes, the assessments. We're able to acquire these things at no cost. The only cost associated with this program is to make sure your teachers are trained to deliver it the way that it's meant to be delivered. So we have the ability to modify or change the notes any way we want. We can make it our own, but there are no costs associated with doing that. One of the things we talk about a lot is the achievement gap. And I like to say access gap because we have both. Locally, Colonial School District has been doing integrated math for 15 years. Keep in mind, integrated math in and of itself is a shift in content. We're talking about shifting content and practice. So we're talking about going a step further than Colonial. But right now, Colonial does outperform us on the Algebra Keystone. They perform us in every category that's reported. They have no intentions of ever switching away from integrated math at this point. They're closing the achievement gap in places that we're not. They have more students who are advanced than we do on this assessment, percentage-wise. But those are the only 4 categories that are reported that you can compare with another district that are public, and they do outperform us on all 4. So when we were at this training, I felt kind of like Mr. Copeland. It's like, okay, I get it, I see it, it looks exciting, but, you know, tell me a little more about this. Like, I need to see this for real. Show me somewhere where this really worked. So I asked them to share with me a high-performing school district that has shown results and growth using this program. So they directed me to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Chapel Hill Carborough School District, City Schools, they are in the Research Triangle of North Carolina. They are actually the #1 school district in the state of North Carolina. They are as similar to us as they could possibly be. They have a 1230 SAT average. It's the same as Lower Merion High School. What they were able to share is their data from the year prior to the implementation and then 3 years after using it. And in 3 years after implementing this program, in a high-performing, high-achieving district, every subgroup showed growth. Every one of them. So this is like looking in the mirror for us. Similar school district. The difference is they do have Math 8. Their kids do work through a Math 8 program before they enter the integrated. But very similar to us and very strong results. Because of the results this district had, the surrounding county, Wake County, is now adopting this program this year. In that area down there alone, there will be 175,000 students using this program. Wake County is the biggest county school district in North Carolina. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Georgine Heibeck. She was with me at the training. We experienced that together. We had a lot of meaningful conversations along the way. And I just want to let her share a little bit about her experience with this, both with the training and what happened when she got back.
First off, thank you for letting me come here and present to you again, those who've seen this twice. Hopefully I can share something new. So I will be honest up front, when Jason first showed us the integrated math materials, when you just look at materials, you don't really get a feel for, you know, what's behind them. And to me, it looked like math. It was math, you know, that were in some of the classes I taught, and it was math that I understood. So when he said, well, we're going to go out to San Diego and we're going to meet with the authors and we're going to learn about this program, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go out to San Diego and I'm going to find as much as I can that's wrong with this program and why we shouldn't use it. Because it wasn't really, you know, knocking my socks off to begin with, just looking at the materials. And I will say I had a complete change of heart when I got to San Diego, and they explained how the materials are very student-led, and the information is not given to the students. So the way that math is traditionally taught, and I myself do this, is I will present them with the vocabulary they're going to need for the unit. I will present them with the most basic steps and then move it up to this next level steps until the higher level steps, and we will end with application problems. And sometimes it's we will end with application problems if we get to the application problems and don't have to move on to whatever the next topic is. And so when they sat us down and they opened their presentation with the Martinez twins, who, by the way, are in that entire unit, So you talk about Carlos and Clarita the entire time you're studying systems of equations and inequalities. It was interesting to me that it looks like a lot of reading, and I'm sure some of you, when you saw it go up on the screen, you were like, that's a lot of reading for a math problem. But as Jason stated, it's very accessible for kids of all levels. So the class that I taught, the numbers of my students are up on the screen now, and my unit wasn't Carlos and Clarita. We weren't at systems yet, but it was on functions, and that's just happened to be where I was with the program, and it opens with a similar problem. It's called a developing understanding task. So the very first day, I explained to the kids that they need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because there's no right or wrong answers the first day. The first day is about me handing them a problem, and ours was about filling and cleaning a pool and trying to get information from them. What do they already know? What kind of vocabulary do they already understand? So while the students are presenting the information, on the side, I'm saying to the class, hey, see how she just said this? Let's write this word down. This is what that means. This is what we're looking at here. This is what is being demonstrated. So rather than feeding them the vocabulary, they're building the vocabulary. They just don't realize it the first day. And for some of the kids, you don't know this because you haven't done the Carlos and Clarita problem. There's 3 things we were looking for in that whole problem. That problem encompasses the entire unit. But there are 3 things we were looking for: slope, x and y intercepts, and could they set up a table that demonstrated the information. Some of the kids, when given that problem, could set up the equations, and technically, really, they should be inequalities, not equations, the inequalities, and solve the problem. And some of the kids, as Jason said, could draw the picture, which would lead them to. But if they got those first 3 things, that's all we needed the first day. The interesting part about the materials are the homework is set up in a way, it's called Ready, Set, Go, that we always, as math teachers, are looking for ways to spiral back the information, because the courses are, I have to teach this section on geometry, and then I have to teach this section on systems, and then I have to teach this section on something totally different. And so you're trying to spiral in the material so the kids don't lose that. The way this course is set up is the spiral is built in, but it's built in a way that the beginning part of the homework is stuff that they've known since the units beforehand that are going to be in this current unit. The middle part of the homework is stuff that's in the stuff that we were just talking about that day, or the stuff we had talked about the day before. The end of the homework is stuff, again, they've seen before, so it's a review, but it's going to be in the next unit. So the spiral that's built into material is done in such a way that it's a seamless transition from one topic to the next. And also, we're reviewing all of the material they've done throughout the year. My students, as you can see, are varying levels. The 5 students with IEPs, that includes autistic support. And I had students who came in the first day, and they maybe got the bare minimum. And the second day, they came in and said, all right, I still don't understand this domain and range thing. Can you go over it? Because we were doing functions, domain and range. But by the third day, they had it. And the way that the process is they're picking up more steam as the problem goes on. While other kids in the room got it the first day and they're taking it beyond where you need them to, the material stretches in a way that allows kids to enter at a low level, but also to extend beyond what, most traditional stuff. I need you to just give me an answer. Can you tell me what X and Y equal? That's not how this is set up. I did pilot this with my one Algebra 1 class while not using it with my second Algebra 1 class. And it was purely to see, is there going to be any difference in the functions unit? I will tell you, the material that was in the functions unit from the MVP program was stuff that, and even the high school teachers, when we presented some of the stuff to them, they were like, well, we don't talk about relative maximums and minimums until Algebra 2 or pre-calculus. But it's in this program. It starts off with anything that is involved with functions. And I did give both of the classes what would have been my functions assessment, and the MVP classroom, you can see, outperformed the other class by 4%. It was one unit, it was one small pilot, but what's more important to me than the information there was I had students in my room who were actively participating who wouldn't say a word unless I had called on them. I had kids volunteering to go up to the board in front of their peers to explain the work that they had done, not knowing that it was correct, not knowing that what they were going to show me was what I was looking for. It was a safe place where kids could say, hey, am I doing this correctly? Like Mr. Lilly was saying, when they give you, when that one sentence is in there that says, Carlos's dad says, what about 12 cats and 12 dogs? For a kid who has no idea how to start the problem, that's how you start the problem. Let's see what 12 and 12 does for us. And what happens is it doesn't work for the constraints, so you have to adjust them. So the nicest part about the program was the level of connectivity the kids had with the material and their willingness to then share that with their peers without knowing that what they were doing was right, wrong, or indifferent. So I was impressed with that. Like I said, I went into this and I thought it was going to be, they were going to tell us that kids need to sit in tables of fours and they need to discuss the math problems and everything needed to be done in group work, and then that's how the work was going to be handed in. When in reality, there's a time in this class for kids to think by themselves for a short period of time, then to discuss with a partner for a short period of time, and then the whole class or a larger group discuss the problem, together. So that was the part I was most impressed with, was that my fear is always when kids are working in groups that one kid is going to do all of the work and the other 3 kids are going to follow along, or there may be a child there who isn't really sure of what is going on. This doesn't allow for that because there's time for the kids to think on their own, so they don't have to try and share if they're not ready. I was blown away with the results with my class. Now, if you ask my students, they would say, it was so uncomfortable and we didn't know, but I think had they had it for the whole year, they would have gotten used to that, and we've continued to do some of that within the class itself. So that's what I have to share about it. Thank you.
And just to share, Georgine didn't tell me that she was going to try to pick holes in that and poke holes in that until the end of the first day training on our way out to the car.
Never going to invite me in again.
So, but that was good. One of the things, I got to see the demo lesson that she did with some of the other administrators, and one of the things that really stood out for me was that there were students answering other students' questions. And that's, when you see that, you know that they really know and they've really learned. So seeing students answer other students' questions is one of those things that was really great to see down there at that lesson. So we talk a little bit about what this would look like, how we would phase something like this in. We would do it one course at a time. This is the mistake a lot of districts make when they phase in some kind of new program like this. They just flip the switch. They say, okay, we're going to take out Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, and we're going to put in integrated math. It doesn't work. When you do stuff like that, it creates gaps in students' learning. A 2/3, 1/3 approach doesn't match up to a 1-1-1. It's just different. So you can't do it that way. So we would phase this in one course at a time. So integrated 1 would go in, then integrated 2, then integrated 3. And before we do any of that, we would want to do a larger pilot, doing more of the units like Georgine had the opportunity to teach this year. So it would take 4 years to phase this in from start to finish. A bigger pilot, and then integrated 1, integrated 2, integrated 3. Again, to avoid those gaps, any students who would currently be in our traditional sequence, for example, if we had a student who was in geometry, they would continue on that path and take Algebra 2 next year. We would not put them into an integrated 3 class. So any student on the traditional pathway would continue on that pathway, again, to avoid gaps in the mathematics. So the integrated pathway would begin for students who have completed Math 8. One of the things that you see, and you've seen it in a couple slides, is a Math 7-8. That would be an accelerated course. Right now, our 8th grade standards are kind of embedded within the 8th grade, whatever course a student's taking. When you read through the Common Core, the recommendation for how to handle acceleration and compaction at the middle level is to do a 7-8 combination course, rather than try to embed 8th grade standards into either Algebra 1 or an integrated 1 course. If you were to look at how Radner approaches middle school math, that's their approach. That's how they teach this. The accelerated course is a Math 7-8, and the regular on-level course is a Math 8. Obviously, professional development and implementation is key to this and getting it off the ground the right way. That was one of the things we learned at the training. It's one of the things we learned in talking with the author. One of the authors, Barbara Kuhl. Again, one of the things I guess I'll highlight a little bit is because this was built by teachers for teachers and not a publishing company, when you ask for a trainer to come in from a company like Pearson, you never really know who you're going to get. You keep your fingers crossed that you get one of the good ones, so to speak. In this case, the authors are the trainers. This is what they do. Barbara Kuhl went on to become the director of mathematics for the state of Utah. And then she decided to go back to the schools, and she's currently an assistant superintendent. But she still trains people how to deliver this MVP math program. So you get the real person in this instance when you go for trainings or you bring somebody in. But professional development would be part of the phase-in each year. So the year we would phase in integrated 1, the integrated 1 teachers would be trained to be able to do that. The integrated 2 teachers would be trained the following year, and integrated 3 the year after that. So training would continue to be a part of all of this. One of the other things that we're very conscious of is how to create a student-centered inquiry-based classroom outside of those 3 courses. So we started that a little bit this year. We worked with Asset STEM, who is out of Pittsburgh. They focus on math and science and STEM training, but what they focus on is how to create a student-centered math classroom. And so we worked on that. Every secondary teacher this year had the opportunity to participate in that, and we continue to work through that locally through our professional development days. So we are conscious and we're working towards that as well. On this next slide, I don't want anyone to get too caught up in the visual, but I am going to highlight a couple things on it. This is what an integrated pathway would look like. One of the things I definitely want to highlight in this is that there are only 2 levels of this. Everyone is either on level or above level. There's no below level. Everyone's on level or above. Currently, in our math sequence, there are 2 acceleration points. We, at the end of 4th grade, recognize some students who can accelerate, and we do that. At the end of 5th grade, we check again, and we accelerate another group. But right now, that's the end of that. There are no acceleration points beyond 5th grade until a student gets to geometry. Geometry right now is our only other course where a student can accelerate. Those years in between are when a student's math mind develops and grows. It's through 6th grade, through 7th grade. And right now, we don't have a really good way to navigate that because we don't accelerate until geometry. I have parent emails highlighting that for me to make sure that I realize that's the case. And I do, and I know that, and we're working to try to rectify that. So as part of the proposal here, I'll highlight the blue diamonds. Okay, we currently have an acceleration point after the 4th grade. Here it is. We currently have one after the 5th grade, but we don't have anything else until geometry. What we're proposing as part of this is at the end of our Math 6 course, we screen students to see which students are able to go up to an accelerated course. We don't currently have this. So that Math 7-8, which is the recommended compacted curricular course for middle school, would be where some of these 6th grade students can go. So it's a new acceleration point. Students who aren't yet ready, their math mind hasn't developed to the point to be able to do that, they jump into Math 7. This is our pre-algebra course. Pre-algebra right now we teach is Math 7. Our resources are Math 7, Pennsylvania Core Math 7. But at the end of that 7th grade year, we're going to offer another screener for students to be able to do those Math 8 standards that they weren't ready for the year before over the summer through some kind of Math 8 course or bridge, and allow them to access integrated 1 in the same year that these students did. So we essentially will have created an acceleration point after 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, and 7th grade. We're trying to capture those students as they mature mathematically. Once a student enters the integrated pathway, we don't have an acceleration point. So we don't have like a geometry acceleration point. But what we've created is a way to accelerate every single year leading up to that point. And again, one of the things that's different is once a student enters the integrated pathway, we have created the flexibility up and down to the honors, easier access to the honors than what we have right now with our current content restrictive curriculum. I will highlight one thing here at the bottom. These integrated courses, we would be able to offer them for credit recovery for a student who has experienced the entire integrated course, but it would be very, very difficult to have a student have an integrated math experience in a 6-week block of time. It's just not enough time to make those connections between the algebra, the geometry, and the data analysis. So that's what's different. But how we get a student to that point, we would have 4 acceleration points leading up to that. If we were to make that change to integrated math, it wouldn't have a huge effect on us as far as how we place students correctly. Right now, what we do with new students to the district is we assess them on their algebra skills, their geometry skills, and their data analysis skills to help us determine which course is best suited for them, how to meet them where they're at. So that challenge is going to be the same for us. We're still going to have to navigate that. One of the things that we are faced with that would become easier in this model is the number of international students we have that come to our district who come to us with integrated math on their transcripts when we try to figure out, do they belong in an algebra class or do they belong in a geometry class, when they know a little bit of both already. So that's a challenge we currently have that becomes easier if we have integrated courses that would align with what their experience has been. So here's what it would look like. We're talking about doing a bigger pilot next year with the units that align with our current Algebra 1 curriculum. We wouldn't do the geometry and data analysis components next year. We would use the units that align to our current curriculum in Algebra 1. We would offer a Math 7-8 course, which is that new accelerated option at the end of Math 6. Then we would also have Math 7. We're asking to rename that course so that it's more reflective of what we actually teach in that year. It's 7th grade math standards. The Math 8 Bridge, which is the new acceleration point for 7th graders who are ready to accelerate at that point. They've matured to that point mathematically. A Math 8 course, which was highlighted throughout the presentation, that districts around us do, that districts across the country do have in place that we don't, which specifically addresses 8th grade math standards for our students. Integrated 1, Integrated 2, and Integrated 3 would be phased in 1 year at a time that would replace our current sequence of Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. So with next year being the pilot, the first year that we would actually have students in a full-blown version of Integrated 1 would be in the year 1920. So we come full circle back to the original pitch that I sort of had with this. And what problems does this solve? So this change to integrated math addresses lots of these at the same time. We would have a sequence that becomes more aligned to the grade level standards. We would eliminate teaching double content to our 8th graders. We help close that access and equity gap, both access to honors level courses and access to the higher level sciences. We all but eliminate double testing from the middle school, with the exception being those our most accelerated 8th grade students who finish Integrated 2 in that year. And we begin to have a student-centered, inquiry-based math program, K-12. Remember, we have it K-7, and we have it from our pre-calculus and beyond. So we would close those 3 years in between and be able to say we have a K-12 integrated math program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
I did not hit escape.
So
in case I have to go back.
No.
No?
Just-
Is that enough?
I'm just teasing. I'm teasing. So, I've known very accomplished, well-educated, and very successful adults who very comfortably say, I'm not good at math. Wouldn't say I can't read, wouldn't say I can't, I don't have much of a vocabulary, but they say, I'm not good at math, as though it's binary. You either are good at something or you're not good at something, as opposed to not having the on-ramps when you were ready to be able to take on higher math. And this issue of where the problem solving as opposed to the procedures fits, we actually had a name for it in the early 90s called the Math Wars. There was an actual fight between varying and vying groups who were going to say, well, math ought to be taught this way. Kind of like math is like, good exercise, I mean, it's for the tough and it's not for the weak. And what I like about the approach that these folks are using is the fact that it's accessible for all kids, and it has the opportunity for kids to move into higher levels of math who were once assumed to not be good at math. So with that?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Lilly and Ms. Hybeck for all of your work, and I know you had the other people on the team as well, but we really appreciate it. This is a huge issue for us, and it's very important for the school district and for our students that we, move in the right direction. And so we really appreciate the time and effort that you have put into this and to present this to us for the second time, because I know that you presented at the curriculum meeting as well. So, and I'd like to open it up to questions or comments, and I'll start with you, Deborah.
Thank you again. I almost feel like I could have given the presentation because I really read through that white paper, and there's so many things that I just think as an educator, it's really, I just love it. I love that it's got the growth mindset. It has Bowler, it has, Duckworth with the grit and the accessibility of all students to be able to have an entry point into it and see themselves as able to do math. So I have a question, because you said you'll be offering a screener at the end of each year because kids' minds, their math minds, mature at different rates. And I think that's fabulous. But when you offer it, does that mean they have an option not to take it? Or is it going to be something like everybody at the end of the year is doing this as just part of the end of the year assessments? And then we can see, oh, wow, these people can move along. Or is it something that they'll then have the option to opt out of? And so how will you frame it if that does become an optional screening test? How will you frame it so that everybody does take it?
One of the things that we have in place right now is we have a screener that we use at the end of Math 7, our pre-algebra course, that at this point is part of a three-prong approach to determining which students can access Algebra 1 full year and which students are better served in Algebra 1 Part 1. So we have a screener in place right now that every student takes to kind of make that determination.
They all take it.
They all take it. So we have something like that in place now. What we would be doing is shifting that back to the 6th grade year instead of the 7th grade year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again for the presentation. I'm very excited that the students can use math rather than do math, and I think that that'll help everyone. In terms of the Summer 8 math, can you explain what will be included in that course and how it integrates to integrated math? It's the Summer Bridge, I think?
Mm-hmm. So essentially what that would be is the core skills necessary to be able to access integrated math 1. When we were at the training, we were working through one of the lessons together, and we were sitting there and realized that the problem needed students to understand the Pythagorean theorem. And so we together said to the trainer at the time, the presenter, we said, well, this question assumes they have Pythagorean theorem. When did they do that in an earlier module in this program? And her response was, no, that's a Math 8 standard. They've already had that. So there are some core things that we would need students to understand, Pythagorean theorem being one of them. Some of the work with radicals and exponents would be another. So there are some core key skills that students would want to be exposed to before entering the integrated program, and that's what that summer course would kind of look like.
Again, thank you for all that you've done to work on this. Anything that helps to close the achievement gap, I'm excited about, and because they are doing math, and it also will help them, the integration with science helps, in my opinion, helps the children to be more excited about what they're doing because they can actually relate to the things that they're doing in math. So thank you. And I think this is the first time that I've seen it, and I think one of the things that really excites me again is it's no cost. And that's really nice. Wow. So, but yeah.
There's going to be staff development, there's going to be stuff like that.
Yeah, I know. But again, thank you. And also I like the fact that you went in wanting to tear it down. And because of how it's put together, you were converted. And so that's good.
You had another mind.
Yeah.
Thank you as well for another presentation. I appreciate the opening with the problem so that we could actually get a real sense of what the integrated math approach looked like. I wanted to ask a question around the acceleration we do at the elementary grades, and if there are any concerns around gaps that might be embedded as we have students skip almost full years of math and what that might look like. Are we able to capture some of those gaps and support students, even though they're accelerated and they're prepared to move forward developmentally? Do we have some concerns? Because those are some things that have come up in past curriculum meetings.
Sure. So one of the things that we thought about really hard in developing that sequence that I shared, the picture that I said don't get too caught up in, but there was a lot of thought that went into that to make sure that we didn't have gaps, because that's something that keeps coming up in the time that I've been here, is that idea of there are gaps when kids get to the higher level math. The way that it's structured now with this proposal is students won't skip any content. They will never have the opportunity to skip content. What we do is we give them that content when they're ready. So a student who is accelerated in fourth grade, in that fifth grade year, they're doing a 5-6 hybrid. If a student accelerates after fifth grade, they're going into, they do sixth grade summer bridge, which captures those skills, and then they access the next course in the sequence. There's no point, because of the bridges or the acceleration options, that allow them to skip a whole course. That was one of the things that, again, through the audit and then in talking with different teachers and content leads here and chairs, when students were getting to courses like Algebra 2 is where we would start to see those gaps. And what we found is it was typically students who had skipped completely the pre-algebra, which is the 7th grade math course. So we've made sure that every student touches each one of these courses, each one of these levels of standards. There's no way a student can go through the sequence with actually skipping something. And that was one of the things we highlighted with the Math 8. So even though we don't have a Math 8 now in this new proposed sequence, even if you're an accelerated student, you will experience that in the Math 7-8 combination class as a compacted curriculum.
That's excellent. I did want to ask to Ms. Pollard's point around the curriculum. Can you give a sense of what the curriculum would look like, given that it's not what we're typically? Is it online? How will the students access it, and what will the teachers be using for the actual curriculum with the MVP program?
The actual resource itself?
Yes.
Okay. So the resource itself, like I said, is available for anyone to use for free, developed by these teachers. They're available online. They're all downloadable. And what most districts do that have used these resources is they download them and host them on their own site, on their own website. because chances are we're going to modify and change some of the stuff that's there. But then you host it as if you own that. So it becomes our program the way we would want to deliver it. So it's a great launching point for us because it's there. And there'll be tweaks along the way, and that's part of what we want to see through the pilot as well.
So then the professional development will make the real difference in terms of how we make it more specific to our program and for our students.
Yeah.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks. Sorry I missed the first time around. I do have a couple of questions, though. So you talked about not missing any content, but there are students who are coming in and out of our district. And if they're coming from another school district who doesn't do integrated math and they're coming in ninth grade, and they've missed integrated 1 and aren't familiar, what are we doing to make sure that those kids are able to do the work without doing it the old way?
Okay.
Can you talk about that?
One of the things that this particular integrated program has that they don't all have is the natural spiral. So Georgine talked about sort of what some of the homeworks look like and some of the lessons. It will circle back and draw upon things that you should be able to do to access the current information, the current lesson. So it's not the type of thing where you'd have to go back and say, here's everything you missed, we're going to try to catch that all up so you can do what we do on a daily basis. It's going to be on an as-needed basis. And for the most part, if a student was coming to us in a second year, they completed an Algebra 1 program somewhere else, it's going to be that little bit of geometry and data analysis where they would need some assistance in that second year that we would be able to catch up in those areas as they access it.
Jason, you make those decisions now, right? Students come in to various places and you have to decide where you place them.
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
Right, but, on one hand, we're phasing it in so that we don't have to bring kids up to speed in integrated 2 who haven't had integrated 1. But now we're also saying that kids coming in from the outside who haven't had integrated 1 will be able to get brought up to speed. I love the program. I love the fact that I would add, you start with a question and you end with create a question that uses what we just learned to solve or whatever. But so, I love that concept because always the first question is, why do I need to learn this, right? When you teach math, that's always like one of the first questions. So that's great. But you really can't answer it, so I'll leave it out there. Just we need to make sure that we have supports and plans in place for how we're going to address kids coming into the district in the middle of this program and making sure that they're not left with gaps, which is what we always struggle with. And then, along with that comes with the kids who miss classes, especially 8th grade, 9th grade, and into high school. These kids are missing class a lot. They're missing class for Science Olympiad trips. They're missing class for sports. They're missing class for, any one of a number of reasons. And on Monday it might be Ben and I, and on Tuesday it might be, Melissa and Laura. So how are we going to bring those kids up to speed who have missed class? Because it sounds like it's very scaffolding and building on, one level on another.
It does. And, you heard Georgine talk about how Carlos and Clarita are in that whole unit. One of the things that it does is it will continually reference back. It'll reference back to previous things. So this initial activity about being a pet sitter, that continues to come up throughout the unit. There are certain things, like Georgine said, there were 3 things in that particular lesson we were hoping to highlight. So already as a teacher, these are the 3 things that someone's going to need to know who missed and is coming back. Like through the teacher notes exactly what someone would have to be caught up on. Because the way the program is structured as far as a daily lesson, there's a lot of individual think time and work time and then sharing out time, there's absolutely time for teachers to access the students or talk to somebody one-on-one and say, hey, I know you weren't here yesterday. Here were the 3 key things from yesterday. You're going to need this equation to do what we're talking about today because it's going to reference that. So there are ways to do that.
I just think that's a lot of balls in there.
Yeah, we can do it.
The one, no, hold on. The one other question I had that I wanted to talk about right now was, so if you take Math 7 and 7th grade, Math 8 and 8th grade, you do Integrated 1 and 9th, Integrated 2 and 10th, Integrated 3 and 11th, that makes pre-calc 12th, not calculus. So kids who are on the path as it's set up are not going to see calculus by senior year. And we had talked a lot about that. Is that something that we've changed our mind on, about whether we want calculus everybody to have had calculus by the time they graduate, or how? What's the feeling on that?
I think that this gives us a better shot at getting there than the way we've been doing it.
Agreed. The students you're referring to now would be in Algebra 1, Part 1 in 8th grade. It's a small percentage of our students that would start complete Algebra 1 in 9th grade, which would be aligned with Integrated 1 in 9th grade. So those students right now reach pre-calculus at the max in senior year. Just a very small percentage of our students.
Right, so what percentage of students do you assume or do you anticipate are going to be in the accelerated and actually have calculus as a possibility?
The student, if you think of the 3-year band of Integrated 1, 2, and 3, replacing Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, the path and the destination are the same. The student that would reach calculus would reach the calculus at the same point that they do now.
Okay, so the whole goal of trying to get everybody to calculus is not really realistic.
That was part of the language around Algebra for All, specifically. And when our most recent math sequence change shifted, that was not as much of a priority, because we found that the gaps that were being created were bigger than we had hoped.
But we are able to get kids to at least pre-calc by their senior year through the integrated approach, correct?
Every student, right.
That's an elective, right? Pre-calc would be an elective, right? Because you only have 3 math in high school?
You're only required to take 3, so that'd be one option for senior year math. There's others.
Could they accelerate?
Great, thanks. And I also wanted to thank you. It's been a long time since I've gotten to talk about math for so long. So, and I'll be brief. I want to echo everyone's comments about how exciting this is. And I want 2 things really resonated with me. The double testing. I have an advanced math middle schooler who really wanted to opt out of the PSSAs because of the keystones in 7th grade. Although it's unclear what will be necessary for graduation, I feel like the kids feel a lot of pressure to take the PSSAs and then the keystones, so I think that's a huge benefit. And also just more on-ramps. There's a lot of pressure to test in 4th grade. There's also some cultural issues with, I think, girls not wanting that kind of math pressure, so I think more on-ramps when people are ready will hopefully diversify advanced math, in a big way, so that's great. My question is, for kids who are really just strong in math in middle school, how will this program benefit them? Because that wasn't quite as clear to me. And I know there are some kids at BC in particular who've needed it wasn't an efficient way to deliver them what they needed right now. So will this kind of give more options to those kids?
What the program offers is extensions and enrichment. So those exist without really moving outside of the same curriculum everybody gets. But there's extensions and enrichment. So there are things built within the program that fit into each individual unit that are ways to extend someone who's able to do that.
Teachers will have those tools, so they'll be able to do that in the classroom as part of the whole class. Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
Almost done, right? I'm one of those people that I actually enjoyed math in school, and except for, I guess, fractions in 5th grade, I remember painfully so. But one of the things about math that I liked is that there was problem solving, and you could always solve for X. There was a right answer, there was a wrong answer. It was pretty concrete. And so my first question is, what type of assessments do you use in this new kind of curriculum? How do you, I realize you start with the problem, but there has to be a solution to that problem, correct? So how do you do testing in this kind of situation where there are right and wrong, there has to be right and wrong answers, right?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I think is unique to this problem, and one of the things that's a challenge whenever you look at trying to do a more student-centered or inquiry-based classroom, especially in math, is finding the balance of the student-centered piece and then traditional problem solving. That's always a challenge. And a lot of times you'll find a program that goes way out here and it's as student-centered as it can be, but then you don't get the practice. And then a traditional program is all about practice. You think back to when we did like 2 to 84 evens, because the odd answers were in the back. There's that end of the spectrum. This is kind of the sweet spot because it comes at the instructional piece and the time when you're in class with students doing these challenging, application and, word problems and real relevant type stuff. There are still traditional practice problems as homework. The assessments look traditional, but there's also an optional performance task that you can choose to do. So it has the best of both worlds. So it does honor the idea that there's value to solving traditional math problems, but also that being able to apply and use the math is also important.
And that sort of leads me to the second question, which is the teacher component and the professional training that's required. It seems to me that in math in particular, the quality and involvement of the teacher is really important. I mean,
Social studies too, social studies.
Well, I'm not diminishing the value in any class, but in particular, a course like math can be enjoyable with an enthusiastic teacher, or it can be dull and boring with a less enthusiastic teacher, and not different than many courses. But how do the teachers convert from traditional, I teach geometry this year, to I teach all three now in interwoven manner? How is that training done, and what kind of, do you see any pushback from the teachers with regard to converting to this type of model?
So to answer your question, Amy Murphy and I, who is my counterpart at Welsh Valley, got the pleasure of teaching the Carlos and Clarita unit, not just that lesson, but the whole unit, to the high school math teachers as a professional development. So it was frightening for me to stand there in front of people who know more math than I know currently. The way that they embraced the lessons, it was like they were kids in the classroom again. So I think there's so much in here that we wish we could do on a daily basis that the enjoyment, and I'm not speaking out of turn, I don't think, the enjoyment in the room while we were presenting the lessons, I think they will find that in their own classroom. I don't think anyone has to give that to them. I think what we witnessed, and this was teachers from Harriton and Lower Merion doing these problems, I think we saw that excitement in them. So I think that'll be there once they see the kids experiencing the math the way that they would like to experience the math, if that makes sense.
Sort of.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the material is in a way that it gets exciting when you see kids getting excited about math, and the teachers themselves will feed off of that. I don't think that's anything that has to be taught to anyone.
Okay, I guess my question was, I understand what you're saying, and I get that. In terms of concrete teacher training, in other words, what is involved in
So
that?
the training that we did is really going through the materials yourself as a student would, and learning how the authors created the lessons, but then also what specifically they were looking for in each lesson. So there's a component that comes with it. There's a teacher's version of the material, which talks the teacher through, on this day, on this lesson, here's what we're looking for. And goes through that process. The other thing that you should know about the material too, and I don't think I said this when I was up here, and I apologize, is there are three main components to the material. There's a developing understanding task, a solidifying understanding task, and a practice understanding task. The developing understanding was that Carlos and Clarita problem. So when kids if they've missed part of that, or if there's something that they're not connecting with, the next day they're developing those understandings that they were introduced to the first day. And then on the third or fourth day, they're practicing those understandings, if that helps. So the training was about how to use that material
Thank you.
in the classroom.
Just to add to that a little bit, I think the shift in practice is going to be more challenging than the shift in content. There's going to be part of the course, because it's integrated, that is going to be familiar to those teachers, whether you teach geometry or you've taught Algebra 2 for 10 years. Part of that course is going to look the same, and part of it's going to look different. To me, the challenge is getting teachers to be delivering a student-centered, inquiry-based approach. Like, that to me is going to be more challenging than asking someone who's taught Algebra 2 to teach a little bit of geometry. I think the content piece is going to be okay.
Could you explain a little bit more what you just said? In terms of, could you just explain, just elaborate a little bit more on that last piece in terms of what you foresee as a possible need, how would it work? I mean, just explain a little more about what you just said, that's all.
Sure. So I'll just go back to kind of what Georgine was talking about. When we did the training, we essentially took the training we went to and tried to turn it around for the high school teachers to give them, this is one of those things that it's hard to visualize what it really is on paper until you've seen it in action. So we put the high school teachers through this so they could experience this. And what happened is some of the comments were, this looks a lot like what I do currently in this class, but then I realized these other units look a little different. So content-wise, some of the information is going to be the same. How it's delivered is what's going to be different. So someone who currently teaches systems of equations is still going to have that in their course, but they're also going to then connect that to other things through geometry and data analysis. But content-wise, I'm not really concerned with the teachers being able to handle the content or deliver the content. The biggest challenge to me is going to be, how do I give ownership to the kids, and then also as a teacher still be part of that and ensure that everyone's leaving here today with a strong understanding of what we're doing. The training that we work through is on how to deliver it in this way. That's where the training really comes in, is that student-centered approach.
Thank you.
Can I just first, let me go back a little bit. If you follow integrated 1, integrated 2, integrated 3, and you're in pre-calc, you would most likely probably want to do a summer program in pre-calc to get yourself into the full calc. That would be your on-ramp there. In terms of what we want to do with the strategic plan, I had promised myself I wasn't going to tell this story again, but you asked for it, so I'm going to do it anyway, sort of. So where this interested me was when I was a K-3 principal in Lawrence Township. One of the things that you do as a principal is you get ready for different events, and one of the events was Black History Month. And one of my second grade teachers, Shirley Ellis, said, I've got somebody who I think would be good to bring in. He's African American, and he's doing postdoctoral works in astrophysics in Princeton. Okay, now I did say this is a K-3 school. So the guy comes over, and you're planning the day, and I'm having people go into different rooms and so forth, and I put all the kindergarten teachers and the classes in the library, and I brought the guy down to the library, and I said, here's the kindergarten. And one kindergarten teacher looks at me and says, "Seriously, Bob, an astrophysicist? That's what you're bringing to the kindergarten?" And I brought him to the kindergarten, and then I went to do other things in other places with other classes. I came back about a half hour later, and the same teacher says, "You're not going to take him, are you?" He was throwing his shoes in the air, talking about black holes and so forth, and he had about 85 kindergartners spellbound. So I walk him out the door, and I said, "How did you get interested in astronomy?" And he says, "Well, I grew up in the Bronx, and my father used to take me on the roof. We got roofs. I mean, I grew up. And he says, I looked at the stars. Now, I grew up I spent a couple of years in the Bronx. I didn't see the sky, but he apparently is a few years younger than me, and I guess the sky was better at the time. So I said, "Well, you must have been really great at math." And he says, "Nah." I said, "Oh, come on. You could count. I'm sure you were really good at math." And he stopped, and he said what so many people have said to me, "You know what's wrong with you guys?" I get used to that. I said, "What's that?" Somebody else is going to tell me what educators don't know. And he said, "Listen, at Princeton, I work with mathematicians, and they love math. I don't love math. I just need to know how to measure the distance between stars, and I need to know the math." He says, you forget that it's not the math, it's how you use the math. And that was a great lesson, and Neil deGrasse Tyson taught me that lesson as he went on, and people tell me he's famous. So that's what we're trying to do, and this connects directly to our strategic plan. This is exactly, and it's also what I think you may have thought was going to happen with the strategic plan. It wasn't going to always be easy to do.
No, I mean, I think that's the strategic plan that we put in place is very ambitious because it's really shifting the way in which, we're thinking about the curriculum and thinking about student-centered approaches and inquiry-driven approaches. And I think this is a great example of that. And it's going to be on a very large scale. So, Diane, did you have another question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just one other question. So we talked about school districts that are adding this or changing their approach to this, and it sounds great. Do you know of any school district or school that switched to this and then decided it wasn't getting the job done and switched back? Because I think there could be lessons learned there.
There are districts that have done that. The challenge that we have in exploring that is a lot of those districts made the switch when that Common Core document came out and said, "Here's the two pathways, pick one," and they picked, and then realized the Common Core was hard, regardless of which pathway you picked. And so they kind of blamed the pathway, the integrated pathway, as the reason for why it was hard and the kids were struggling, and switched back, only to realize they're still struggling because it's still hard. So there are districts out there, you can find them.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm wondering if there were, they had implementation problems or they had whatever. And, we want to make sure that we're as successful as possible in implementing this. And if there are people who tried and failed, learning from their failures could help us be successful.
I think, as Jason said, they went from one to the other, and this is a rather long implementation process that we're using to get there, to try and make sure that we're deliberate and not trendy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much again for all of your time and efforts. We appreciate it. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mr. Copeland.
I have not as lengthy a presentation on textbooks and resource adoption.
But a lot of them.
You don't have to vote on this.
No.
No, I'm out. I can't even get it.
Oh.
Good evening, everyone.
Oh, it's working now.
So a few weeks ago,
What am I talking about?
we were able to provide each of you with resources in the executive boardroom for preview. The resources, there were 10 of them. One elementary resource for the investigations math curriculum. There was one resource for the middle school ancient world history alive, 2 AP humanities courses, and we had 3 physics or 4 physics and 2 statistics resources available. With that, what we did is provided you with decision briefs, which we typically don't provide, and provided those briefs to Mr. Copeland. Those briefs were also provided to the public for their review as well. So all of these resources have been out and about with the board as well as the community for some time for review. What's important to know is that all of these particular text resources have been vetted through either a grade level team or a content department extensively. And the grade level teams and departments reviewed each one of these resources as well as other multiple resources to make the most acceptable decision for the textbooks that we're putting in front of students. All of these resources are provided with a digital component, as we had spoken before in previous curriculum committee of the board meetings. Many of the publishing companies now are transitioning a hard textbook for a digital resource and bundling their packages such that way that the digital resources are really overtaking and textbook resources are following that in classroom sets, which we've seen with these particular resources. So what you see on your screen right now, we're looking for approval for the 2017-18 purchase of the investigations for elementary grades 3 to 5. And I'll go into a little bit of detail, but not lengthy, for each resource on upcoming slides. And what we're looking to do right now is provide you with some textbook resources for the adoption after the 18-19 budget is approved, so that our curriculum supervisors may move ahead with the July 1 purchase to ensure that resources are here for the start of the school year. So there are 9 of those particular resources at the secondary level, and knowing that all of these resources have been budgeted for in the proposed budget that you'll hear a little bit more about on Wednesday evening from Dr. Eveslage. So the 3 to 5 math investigations unit, if you will recall, in April of 2017, the board approved the kindergarten through grade 2 investigations, and we were in a continuation of the pilot from grades 3 to 5 with that resource through this year, and we are at the point right now where grade levels 3 to 5 are looking to adopt this resource for next school year. So this is actually money that's in this year's budget, in the 17-18 budget this year, and we're looking to purchase the Investigations 3 for grades 3 to 5 this year, so that resources are in the district before June 30th of this year. For History Alive, The Ancient World, this is a 6th grade social studies resource. The digital resource has expired at the end of this particular year and is a resource that teachers would like to continue at the middle school level. And new for the 2017 online resource, there are additional primary resources or primary sources that support close reading activities that are aligned to the research initiative that we've started and would like to continue in the 18-19 academic year. The cost of this particular resource is $77,768, and we're looking to service 710 students with this resource in grade 6. As you all know, the AP Human Geography course was a course that we included in this year's program planning guide as an elective for grades 11 and 12. We have been developing some of that curriculum with our teachers at the high school level and looking to purchase resources for 70 students who we anticipate are going to be enrolled. We're looking to purchase 110 copies, hard copy as well as digital resources for students so that we can have this particular elective up and running come September. The cost of this particular resource is $17,793.08. Our AP Government, we had some curricular shifts in the AP course. for AP Government, and as described by the College Board, changes in the AP course followed 4 tiers, and you'll see here in the highlighted text that the AP course allows for more room for teachers to deepen student understanding within the AP Government class, as well as more of a focus for students to be able to do with the knowledge and development and the U.S. Foundation documents and other primary sources that are available, and more emphasis on the applied learning. And the 2018 edition of this textbook is also aligned to all of these particular changes. We're looking to service 380 students in the AP Government course with a purchase of 400 resources, both text and digital, for $70,510. This also comes with a 6-year subscription to the online edition. We have a series of 4 physics resources. All of the physics resources are extremely outdated, and Mr. Lilly is here as well to sort of say yes to that. We've been using these resources for quite some time in our physics classes and really looking at updating and staying current with our physics resources. Our college prep physics course, this curriculum is largely project-based with really no utilization of a textbook. So we're looking to purchase a Discovery Education tech book, which is strictly an online resource that supports those project-based learnings. We're looking to service 109 students for $8,205.99. Our honors physics course is looking to upgrade to a Pearson product. And this particular resource, again, has been outdated. You may see that the copyright date on this particular resource is 2014. The reason for that particular copyright is anything that's beyond the 2014 really begins to get into the college level courses, which is higher than really where we wanted our students in delivering content at an honors level course. So the department and teachers felt very comfortable with staying within the Pearson. We're also looking to include the Discovery Education tech book for physics that we're including in the college prep as an additional resource for this. So the cost of this particular resource is a combined of $25,977, as well as the digital textbook for $14,634. We're looking to service 195 students. Moving into our AP Physics, again, the AP Physics 1 is an entry level to our AP Physics course, and it's mainly an algebra-based course rather than a calculus-based course, and we're looking to purchase this resource because it's fully aligned and designed to support the entry level of the AP course while still allowing for a deep understanding of physics as well. We're looking to service 149 students at the cost of $29,613. And again, this is also coming with a digital subscription for 6 years. Our AP Physics C course, this book provides grade levels with writing consistently across the curriculum and the course. Again, one of the components that this textbook resource is coming with is the WebAssign, which allows for immediate feedback to students for statistical analysis during formative assessments within the class. Cengage is also providing additional supports for our teachers through investigations as well as professional development. We're looking to service 201 students and purchasing 221 resources at the cost of $48,802. Moving into our statistics course at our college prep level, this textbook had many features that teachers thoroughly enjoyed, one of them being the user-friendly platform for students. This particular resource folds in a work example that shows students how to actually solve a problem. Another one is a try the problem, where students have an opportunity to actually try that problem and receive immediate feedback or reinforcements on that particular problem, and then allows for extensive practice sets after that, so students have the ability to practice within this platform. We're looking to service 121 students at the cost of $19,486.20. Our last resource is the AP Advanced Placement resource for stats. And the team wanted a textbook that really maintained the readability and reliability of the current textbook. This book utilizes the math lab schools for personalized learning, where students can focus on topics that they have not yet mastered. And the My Math Lab offers a complete e-text and videos along with animations to help students learn and support that learning. And this is the same online resource that's used at the pre-calculus course. So many students are already familiar with this particular course and with the system. We're looking to service 231 students at the cost of $57,396.68. Happy to take questions.
So what we did is, because we knew that CCOB was so jam-packed, we made the books available for the board in the executive boardroom, and we gave you a decision brief, and we made that decision brief public, so to try and speed things up.
So do you need a recommendation from
I,
the board?
my understanding is the way we've done this in the past is, I don't know, has the board taken an actual vote on textbooks?
We do vote.
Yeah, okay.
No, CCOB votes in order to move it to facilities and purchasing for evaluation.
Okay, that's right.
So what we would be doing would be, I'll get to questions, I'm sorry, but what we will be doing is
Committee of the whole.
a committee of the whole will recommend whether or not to move it to facilities and purchasing for review of the contracts, and then it would come back to the board once it's been recommended or not by them. So that would be how we would do it. So, but you can still take questions.
Thank you for the presentation, the information beforehand. I did have a question on the textbooks that we have digital resources primarily for. Are there hard copies available, for example, for History Alive, where some students may not be able to fully access the digital platform?
We do hold classroom sets for students who don't have digital access at home, so that a class set is always available within the classroom for a student to take.
Okay, excellent. And for our curriculum cycle, what are we on about, a 5 to 6 year cycle in terms of renewal, or where are we in terms of ensuring that we have as current texts as are needed for our students?
So last year, I had an opportunity to sit down with both elementary and secondary curriculum supervisors. We've developed a 6-year cycle where we go through a review of the particular resources that we have, and how those resources are working for students, how they're working for teachers, and we're generally on a 6-year program with those particular resources, because a lot of the vendors right now and textbook companies provide us with a 6-year license. However, if licenses are running short and supervisors feel the need to accelerate, we have those particular conversations during year 4, year 5, to sort of gauge where we're at, if we're going to have an early adoption of a new text in 5 years or rather than 6 years.
And that's built into the budget to make
It
sure
is.
that if we have the flexibility.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions at this time? Okay, very quick.
See the time. With integrated math, offering opportunity for more students to access higher level science, do you see that having a potential impact on the number of resources that we'll then need to purchase? Do you purchase with a cushion the number of licenses or books?
We do. So we purchase, as a curriculum department, we will budget for new resources that are coming in. So during each particular curriculum cycle, we'll look at a cushion of probably about 10 to 15 students based on enrollment growth. Anything that's after that would be budgeted out of the building budgets where they receive their particular allocations. So new students, or if new classrooms were to open, then that comes out of the building budgets where those funds are allocated.
Thank you. Was that a question?
No.
No, okay. So just to remind everybody, we are not voting to purchase these textbooks. We're voting to move this to consideration to Purchasing and Facilities Committee for review. I guess, do I have a motion? Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? The motion passes, and you'll get to review it Thursday. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Excuse me, give me 1 second here. Okay, at this time, we move to audience recognition. This can be on agenda items or any item. The way this works is that you may make public comment if you are a resident or a taxpayer in the district, and we would ask you to come up and sign in with Ms. LaPera. You'd have to sign in your name as well as your address. And then when you come to speak, you should state your name, generally where you live. You don't have to give your specific address to the public because this is all on videotape. And you have 3 minutes to make your comments. So if you're interested in speaking, please come sign in and then we'll start taking comments. In other words, I'll close the comment list. So if anybody would like to make comments, please sign up at this time. Thank you. Okay, does anyone else want to sign up? Okay, I will close the list at this time, and sir, you can go ahead and start.
Thank you very much. My name is Todd Bressie. I'm the chair of the board of the Lower Merion Conservancy, and I'm a resident of Narberth. The Conservancy is a member-supported, community-based organization dedicated to protecting open space, preserving historic resources, and conserving the local watershed. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight about the district's proposals to acquire a suitable site for a new middle school. Lower Merion is privileged to have some of the finest schools in the country. We appreciate the district's commitment to accommodate and welcome all families that want their children to benefit from a Lower Merion education. My family has benefited from this. My 2 children have gone through the school district from start to finish. The Conservancy also acknowledges the challenges associated with absorbing a rapidly expanding student population. The Conservancy firmly believes, however, that a plan to accommodate the district's growing enrollment must respect and protect the existing historic character and natural beauty of the township. Lower Merion's walkable neighborhoods, tree-lined streets, scenic byways, historic architecture, and most importantly, publicly accessible open spaces are central to its appeal. These are reasons that our family moved here, as well as for the school district's quality. For this reason, the Conservancy strongly opposes the school district's proposal to consider the condemnation of any part of the Stoneleigh property. Stoneleigh's permanent protection was secured in 1996 by a conservation easement between its owner, the Haas family, and Natural Lands. In 2016, the Haas family generously donated the 42-acre property to Natural Lands, and the land conservation easement over the entire property was transferred to the Lower Merion Conservancy, so we are the easement holder. At this time, Natural Lands also donated a facade easement on the property's mansion to the Preservation Alliance of Greater Philadelphia. Together, these easements were intended to protect this cultural and environmental destination in perpetuity for the enjoyment and edification of everybody. Stoneleigh's proximity to the densely developed communities and its accessibility to transit ensures that individuals from all over the community will have the opportunity to appreciate its splendor. The Conservancy urges the school district and the board to recognize this, to abandon any action to condemn any part of the 42-acre parcel for a new school or fields, and to allow Stoneleigh to be enjoyed as the Haas family intended it to be, free and open to everyone forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. Denise?
Chrissy Madden, and then Molly Morrison.
Hi, thank you for entertaining my comments this evening. I live in Villanova, right near the Haas Estate, and I asked the school board to look at other options to serve the school community besides Stoneleigh. While enrollment growth is a serious issue, you cannot unring the bell once a taking of a preserved space is done. Once it's gone, it's gone. The township, to my knowledge, does not have other opportunities for preservation on the horizon. This Montgomery Avenue corridor is a busy artery to Lower Merion. It's highly trafficked on Montgomery and County Line roads. Stoneleigh is an oasis in the middle of this area, already containing the Islam Center, back of Villanova, and the Villanova Conference Center. My daughter and I made a daily visit while the new bunnies were being carved, and we are hopefully looking forward to many years of strolling through the gardens. The Haas family could have easily handed this property over to a developer or Villanova, but it entrusted the Natural Lands Trust with much participation from Lower Merion. The announcement over the weekend, Stoneleigh's opening weekend, that you would still look at a 7-acre portion of the 42 acres at Stoneleigh by eminent domain for fields no matter what just made me sad. It seems to me like the letter circulating from Whistler Pearlstein that you might want to take all of Stoneleigh. After 3 years of planning and planning, please don't make Stoneleigh a catchphrase in Lower Merion. Consider other options within the district. Consider a second middle school on Monk Road. Revisit a smaller elementary school at 1860. There has to be a middle ground before leaping to take Stoneleigh by eminent domain. It takes something away from every single member of the community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
Good evening. President Gilbert and members of the board, Molly Morrison, and where I live. I'm the president of Natural Lands, and we are the owners of Stoneleigh in Villanova. I don't live in Lower Merion Township.
Given your position as the president, I'd like to ask the board for a motion to allow her to speak on behalf of the trust, because we don't usually allow people who are not members, although if you're not a taxpayer, so you have to be a taxpayer. So can I get a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. The motion passes. We will make this exception for you to speak, and you can start the time now. We'll start over. That did take part of your time. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that opportunity to address the board this evening and the superintendent. As I said, I'm Molly Morrison. I'm the president of Natural Lands, and I am here tonight, unsurprisingly, to talk about Stoneleigh, but I am certainly not here alone. In addition to the others who have spoken already, I am here on behalf of the thousands of people that have been in contact with Natural Lands over just the last 4 or 5 days, expressing their discomfort, their anger, and their surprise that the school district would continue to pursue Stoneleigh as an alternative for either playing fields or a school, because they are concerned that what they consider to be a one-of-a-kind treasure in Lower Merion Township is being jeopardized. The Haas family called Stoneleigh home for over 80 years, and the decision to gift the land and the historic gardens to Natural Lands represented their highest hopes, the highest hopes of John and Cara Haas, that their beloved home would be preserved, that the gardens would be maintained, and that the property would be open to the public. For over 2 years, Natural Lands has been planning and planting and repairing and renovating the grounds at Stoneleigh. It's a hard act to follow the Lmsb brothers, who contributed design ideas to Stoneleigh Garden for over 50 years, but our staff has been busy. They have planted over 10,000 plants and have installed over a mile of pervious trails for visitors. The trails wind gracefully through the incredible specimen trees dating from the turn of the 20th century, including 10 trees on the list of state champions. Our work for the last 2 years has been about planning for Stoneley's future, which has now been called into question. This weekend, we celebrated the opening of Stoneley, a natural garden, and even the less than perfect weather could not deter the thousands from visiting. To a person, the visitors told us how much they appreciate the beauty of Stoneley. They delighted in its history, marveled at its grandeur, and anticipated learning the benefits of gardening in concert with nature. And they told us that having publicly accessible open space in the township is a priceless benefit. Our visitors were as committed as we are to saving Stoneley from condemnation, a sentiment that we have voiced consistently, and I will again tonight say, we will pursue every option available to defend Stoneley from a taking. I invited you in a letter that I sent you today to visit Stoneley and to enjoy a guided tour of the property. I hope you'll take me up on that offer. And in the meantime, I appreciate any help that you can give us in saving Stoneley. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. All right. At this, you have to read the recommended action.
Great job. Under recommended actions, the administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approves the agreement with Intermediate Unit 13 for software and training to facilitate compliance with PA School Code Act 168 for a startup cost of $500 and the price per candidate fee of $5.
Are there any questions? Do I have a motion to approve? Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Then the motion passes. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We appreciate your taking the time to give us your comments. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.